We are going to call to order the Digital Access Committee on January 10th at 2:51. I apologize for the delay. We have Commissioner Ward and myself. Commissioner Ariola is absent, but hopefully he'll be here shortly. City Manager, are you leading this one or handing it off? Or?
No, we have spoken, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Ward, we've spoken with Magellan. We've had several opportunities to have a presentation following up where former City Manager Feldman obviously felt guidance from the commission was to move this forward, obviously utilizing the consulting services of Magellan. We have had several meetings just discussing internally with GRU and of course staff from the general government side how this might move forward, and obviously after Magellan's discussion we can get into that a little bit more. But we are prepared to hear from Magellan. They've concluded, their report and they're ready to share it with you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. All right. Who's from Magellan? Can you hear us?
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
We are here.
Thank you for being with us.
Absolutely. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll go ahead and get started. Are we good to get started from your side?
We're ready, yes.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Courtney Violette with Magellan Advisors. I am the Chief Operating Officer here, and I've been working with the city team for about the last 6 to 7 months on this project. This is our second time at the Digital Access Committee. We met with you all back in August upon our delivery of our first interim deliverable, and we're here today to present some additional findings. I do have with me on the call today David Brevitz, one of our senior consultants whose focus is in regulatory issues. Number of items on the agenda today. We have about 20 slides or so we would like to work through. We're going to discuss a little bit about the key objectives and goals of your project, the work we've completed to date. We want to talk a little bit about some of the scope of work we've completed, including market analysis, share some project maps, as well as some project estimates, capital cost estimates. We'll also review a few business models that we were asked to forecast and go through a number of other items such as funding options, regulatory, legal, and next steps. I do want to point out that we have had the opportunity to review this slide deck with city management and leadership. We've also had a chance to review it with GRUCOM leadership, and we look forward to working through this with you today. If there are questions, please feel free to stop us, and we'll go ahead and take care of those as we come across them. I do want to take a chance to remind everybody really why we're here. Magellan responded to a bid in the spring of last year with the stated objectives from the city to make high-speed fiber internet services available to all residents and businesses at an affordable price, really in order to address the digital divide that is within the community. And you had a number of goals or outcomes that were tied to that. And those included things like increasing the number of successful, sustainable and small local-owned businesses, reducing poverty levels, ensuring that the infrastructure and community broadband that's deployed throughout Gainesville is in fact fast, reliable, and affordable, and that any infrastructure that is deployed supports a local diverse economy, attracts new businesses, and also supports a successful minority women-owned business program. These were published in the RFP as goals of the city as it relates to this project. This is really what we've been working through for the last almost year. I do want to remind everybody that the city of Gainesville has been in the broadband space and as a telecommunications provider really for over decades now. As far back as 1996, GRUCOM was certificated by the Florida PSC here in the state as a telecommunications provider. In 2016, GRU had reorganized GRUCOM to really elevate the importance of that business entity within the organization. And over the last really 5 or so years, the city and GRUCOM have been analyzing and researching what opportunities are out there for perhaps the city to take on more of a community broadband focused on residential services potentially throughout the city. In 2018, the city commissioned a broadband study by CCG That was provided to the city and reported in 2019. We have reviewed that report, and we largely agree with many of its assumptions and forecasts that have been provided. But I do want to point out that that report was, over 2 years old. It was pre-COVID, right? So we all know things have changed greatly since then. Magellan responded last year, or in 2020, to an RFP to develop a fiber to the home business plan, and we started that work in May of last year. Again, we presented to the DAC some initial findings in an interim deliverable in August, and we began meeting with city leadership in December last month, really reviewing the findings to date. We've completed a bunch of work over the last 8 months, and those are things that we're going to present to you today. Included in that are things like market analyses. We've met with dozens of stakeholders throughout your community, both within the city departments structures, as well as outside of the city organization itself. We've also met with GroupCom over these last 8 months several times. We have reviewed various regulatory and policy issues related to the project. We have evaluated a few different business models, design and network architecture options, as well as operations and management areas. Today, we really want to present to you a couple of the business models that we reviewed, as well as the financial modeling and funding options, and talk about a roadmap and business plan as we look to conclude this project over really the next 30 to 45 days. As the manager mentioned when we kicked this off just a few moments ago, our interest in today's presentation, in addition to providing you with the details of the work we've completed to date, is really to hear from the DAC members and to hear your feedback, your thoughts, and hopefully some direction as we look to move forward. So, as you all know, there are several incumbents and several providers that are operating within Gainesville today. We're going to focus on really the two primary incumbents that we've reviewed and that are, largely present throughout the community. As you'll notice here, both AT&T and Cox were evaluated. We did review all advertisements and marketing materials that they provide for the city of Gainesville for taking services within Gainesville. We also did some mapping analysis to determine where services were available and where they were not. As you can see on the AT&T side, we did find gigabit service, $60 gigabit service, really throughout the city. It was available at 5 out of 8 addresses we looked at. I would point out that there was a 12-month price increase. So again, this was a promotional advertisement, if you will. So that price for service does go up to roughly $80 or a little more after the first 12 months. And there's also data caps and overage costs associated with the AT&T services. From a Cox residential perspective, we were also successful in finding services throughout the city at all the addresses we had looked for. Cox does advertise service from 25 megabit up to 940 megabits within the city of Gainesville. That upper limit of those services are about $99.99 a month. And again, Cox does also have data caps with overages. And so I want to point that out because what's important, and again, this is usually in the fine print, the service you sign up for, the price you see in your advertisement, right, isn't always the final service cost. So we all know data caps really mean that they're going to cap your data usage and charge you, right, any overages over a certain amount of data that you may utilize within their network. So as you can see on the AT&T side, data caps for DSL are in the 150 and 350 gig range. Fixed wireless is in the 1 terabit range. And overage costs can be $10 per additional 50 gig that you may consume. So these issues and these overages are really tied to the amount of consumption that any household or any individual may utilize on the network for any given month. Normally for typical internet type services or typical internet type access, this isn't an issue, but as we begin to merge video and other types of content over the internet, this really does become an issue. If you have 3 or 4 or 5 devices in your household that are streaming, whether that's streaming for DirecTV or Netflix, right, or any of the streaming options out there, that will eat at your available data usage for that month. And again, you're going to pay for anything additional that you utilize. So, while we do see competitively priced, somewhat affordable prices advertised by AT&T and Cox, what is important is that those prices they advertise are not the final prices, right, for the end user.
I do have one question on that.
Sure.
Are those, and as far as, those are download speeds, but as far as upload speeds, are those any symmetrical upload speeds, or I think Cox lags more than AT&T on upload, but it's becoming more of an important issue as
Yeah,
well.
and usually the data limits are on the download capacity, right, the download speed.
No, not the your data caps, but just the,
Oh, yes.
in terms of symmetrical speeds and things like that, in terms of upload, are the upload speeds lagging in some areas, or?
They are not, yeah, exactly. So these are not symmetrical service offerings, right? So, the Cox service, while they may advertise a gigabit service or 940 megabits download, right, that upload is going to be constrained to somewhere between 10 to 30 megabits. So your point is well taken. These are not symmetrical services.
Thank you.
We also worked with city leadership to identify priority areas of the city. This is not the first time you all have seen this map. We did go through a couple iterations of this map and the boundaries of these different priority areas under the previous manager. And again, this was presented during that interim deliverable. You can see the priority areas 1 through 5. You can also see the number of single-family units that are available within each of those. There are also public housing sites and facilities identified. These priority areas were identified through a number of different data sources, which included urban HUD data, your low mod, which is really your low to moderate income data levels. We looked at different household and census block data. We looked at FCC availability data as well as the NTIA maps that were published recently. We also received a lot of the unit counts, so meter counts, mileage that you're going to see in this for construction purposes. A lot of that was derived from GroupCom's data that was provided to us, mainly GIS data. As far as CapEx estimates and projections for building out a system, this is really the crux of financial modeling, right, and developing business models and financial models projections. Everything starts with the capital projections to build out a system. I want to point to a couple items here. First of all, we are going to review here in the next couple slides really 2 different models that we were asked to model. One of those is what we're calling the amenity option. And if you remember from our last Digital Access Committee meeting, the concept around an amenity option was where the city of Gainesville would provide a fiber connection to each and every household throughout the city as a benefit and provide some type of level of service, again, as an amenity, as a free service, if you will. And we'll talk about the details around that here just momentarily. Under that amenity option, we also assumed 100% of the households would be connected. In the general telecommunications environment, you generally only connect a household when that household has signed up for a service. And so you're going to see that in the utility model we're going to show you here momentarily. But under the amenity model, right, everyone gets the connection. Any Gainesville property who pays a tax essentially would receive that connection. These capital cost estimates that we've broken down on the right side, the first 5 areas, OSP construction, buildings, PMCM, network equipment, systems and refresh, right, those are all pretty standard across both models. The premise drops here that are outlined in red, $70 million is a cost to basically connect every household within the city of Gainesville, right, from the street or the right-of-way out front of their home to the side of their home. This number at 100% is only attributed to the amenity model that we're going to review. So this total cost that you see here, again, this is to build out the full city, connecting every single family or every single home within the community. That number is less under the utility option, as you'll see here momentarily, because under the utility option, we're only connecting those households that actually sign up and take the service from the city. We're going to break both of these options out more in detail here momentarily.
If you can hold for a question, Commissioner Ward.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So what you're saying under page 8 there, yeah, is if we were going to drop this to every home in the community, every single-family home in the community, not including apartments, right? It's $157 million, starting from scratch, basically.
That is correct. So we made a number of assumptions throughout this project, right? And one of those assumptions was as it relates to existing assets within the community. So, we did use things like aerial poles, electric poles where they're available. We went underground where they're not. The OSP construction here of 681 miles, that is additional construction required to build out additional fiber throughout the city, in addition to what the city and GNV-SPAN already has out there. And that additional 681 miles essentially allows you to pass every household and really every business within the community, right? That means fiber will be out front of the doorstep, right, of every home. The premise drops is that final connection, right, connecting from the street to the side of the house. So in order to connect every household, 100% of them throughout the community, yes, this is that total number that we're projecting.
Okay. I just want to clarify a little more. You said connect every business and household, and then the previous slide, the yellow, you have 35,000 units. There aren't 35,000 single-family homes in that area, and most of those are apartments. So are you sure that number is just single-family homes, 100% premise drop, or does that include businesses and apartments?
Yeah, so this is homes, single-family homes.
That's just single-family homes. Does not include businesses?
We are under the OSP construction, right? You'd be passing all the businesses, but we didn't.
I guess more of the premise drops. Is that
Correct.
just single-family homes that premise drops, or does that include dropping to businesses and to apartments as well?
No, we didn't analyze any apartments
Okay.
within these numbers.
Thank you.
So we did distribute this PowerPoint in advance last week. I'm not going to read through all of this slide, but we thought it was important to provide a side-by-side comparison, really a SWOT analysis for the 3 different options that the city really could consider. One being the city amenity option, as we outlined, where again the city funds build out of the network, including drops to every single residential premise, really using a special assessment, right, or some other financing mechanism. What's important is under the city amenity model, as you see here momentarily, there is no debt service that's assigned to that model, right? The assumption is, based on previous instruction by the previous manager, was to look at the city amenity option as really the city finding funding sources to cover CapEx. So city amenity, we're really only focused on things like the operating cost, renewal replacement, funding reserves and things like that. We did not account for debt service within that model. Within the city utility model, that is a more normal approach, if you will, to a city building out fiber and launching really a broadband utility. So we've structured this and we've forecasted this as really a bolt-on to what GNV-SPAN is doing today. Obviously GNV-SPAN is out in the community, serving enterprises and community anchors and focusing on small, medium business markets. We didn't want to do anything to really disrupt that, and we also didn't want to do anything to dig too far into what they're doing today. So what we did here was really on both of these was forecasted a residential bolt-on to GNV-SPAN, right? Really looking to take advantage of whatever existing assets and infrastructure are there in place, and also looking to really focus the financial projections on just what the incremental add-on would be, focusing on the residential markets. We also did a bit of analysis around concepts for a public-private partnership. This is a fairly, new concept over really the last 5 years, where we've seen broadband development really take hold. And under these options, right, public-private partnership, the concept is really the city takes some role in funding the build-out portions or all of the network or none, and selects a partnership with a provider, right? Could be an incumbent, could be a regional provider, could be a national provider, right? And there's a structured contract whereby the city has certain roles in fulfilling broadband deployment within the city, and its P3 partner has certain roles and responsibilities as well. Those roles and responsibilities of each partner, the city and the private partner, can take a lot of different shapes and a lot of different structures. But the concept is that the city can take on as much, or really as little of the broadband deployment process as it sees fit. So, keep these in mind as we work through these next couple of slides, but we're going to dig in a little bit into these options here a little bit more. So the first one we want to discuss is really the amenity concept. And again, this was a request from city management last year that we look at this concept. First, the city want to offer some type of free service to all of its households. 50 megabits per second is really what we targeted. With that, there's an estimated 681 miles of distribution fiber that would need to be built out across the 5 phases we had identified. And again, in this model, right, all households would be connected. We did not model any initial CapEx really in this project, in that all of the CapEx would be funded through grants or some other funding sources that are really not tied to the business model. Traditionally, and as you'll see here in the utility model, you have a lot of things you model and a lot of things that are in the financials, such as OpEx and CapEx and reserves and things like that. In this amenity concept, we didn't include any CapEx or debt service, right? So the network gets built out and it's funded through some means other than a telecom or a revenue bond, right? That would be paid back through the model. Within this model, we did project that about 50% of the households would take the free service, and that another 50% would take a higher speed service, right? Something that they would actually pay for, like a gigabit service. And they would add on a phone, or perhaps not, right, at a nominal additional fee. You can see the rate structures that we modeled here on the left side of the chart, or of this slide. And on the right-hand side, you can see really the outcomes. So first of all, the products, you can see, again, 50 meg was modeled as free, so a free amenity type service. If you want a 500 meg symmetrical service, $29, a 1 gig, $49, and then you can see what the phone service costs, about a $20 add-on for the phone each month. On the right-hand side of the screen, as we look at some of the outcomes of the modeling, again, uptake, which is defined as how many subscribers are taking a service from you, right, in this model, is really 100%. Because either they're taking a free service that they're utilizing, or they're taking a free service and they're not utilizing it. Or they're paying for a different service, right? Like the ones we've identified here on the left-hand side. You can see the total OpEx required for renewals and refreshments is $157 million. That's the amount of money that would have to be injected into this model to cover the cost to build out the network. There's about another $116 million in operating costs over those 20 years. We did assume some funding provided by the city. We modeled about $15 million of actual funding required. We also modeled some working capital that would be required. Working capital is essentially necessary for the first handful of years, 3 or 4 years of the project, to make sure you have enough cash on hand while the network's being built out and while customers are signing up. And what you'll see here is over that 20-year period, right, assuming that 50% of those households pay for a service, you're going to collect about $131 million in revenue. And this is what we consider really about a break-even scenario, because after 20 years, there's really only about $3 million of cash left in the system. In the amenity model, this was not meant to be again, a money maker, if you will. We were asked to try to target really a break-even scenario. So what you can see here, some of the key takeaways is really to get to a break-even scenario, right? It takes about 50% of the households to actually pay for a service. If 75% of the households take the free service, right, this is not a sustainable model as it sits. The last assumption I do want to point out is that it does assume some other type of a special assessment or other funding to raise the initial capital build-out costs. So there are issues with this model. I would also point out that, again, we don't have any other case studies, if you will, not only in Florida, but across the United States, where, again, internet is being provided as an amenity, right? That is a new concept, and, there are lots of issues tied to that, we all would need to work through if this is something the City Commission wants to continue moving forward and looking deeper at. Again, we think the amenity concept has a lot of issues and a number of risks tied to it, just because of regulatory, legal, and other concerns. As we look at the utility concept, I want to point out that, this is just like what the city of Chattanooga and other, major cities that have done this across the country have really done, right? Where they're launching this as a utility offering. They are only connecting customers when a customer signs up to take a service, right? This is not free. There's nothing that provided as an amenity. This is a service that's provisioned and charged monthly. Within the utility model, we only assume a certain percent of uptake within the households, which means, again, we're not assuming 100% of connections, and we're not assuming 50% of those people are going to pay. Right? Uptake is based on what we can project. There is no amenity service, and all CapEx is funded through some sort of bond or loan mechanism, which is paid back through revenues from the broadband utility. We did assume up to $15 million of cash into the project, whether that's through ARP grants or other sources. And again, here you can see the product rates that we've identified. So 1 gigabit goes to about $75, 500 meg symmetrical $60, and a 300 symmetrical service goes for about $50. We also have phone offerings, which you'll see here on the right-hand side. The model here is a little bit different, right, in that debt service is included in these projections. You can see the assumptions around the numbers of residential passings. We've also identified the borrowing rates for the capital requirements. Here you'll see 3 different scenarios. The uptake percentage of 47% is what we identify as really the break-even scenario. Again, in this model, being that we've modeled this as a bolt-on, right, to Brewcom in that of a residential offering, we are not taking into account revenues from small, medium businesses or enterprises or any other customer segments throughout the city, right? So these financials are strictly on residential uptake. At 47% uptake, you can see that there's about $4.2 million in the system at the end of 20 years. So that is roughly a break-even scenario. If you can achieve a 55% uptake and connect roughly 17,600 customers to an internet service, there's about $35 million of free cash flow at the end of 20 years. And again, at 65%, you can see with just about 20,780 customers, you generate about $71 million in free cash flow over that same 20-year period, right? So what's the difference here? It's just simply that more customers are signing up, meaning you're generating more revenues, right? And you're spreading your capital costs across more customers, right, over that term. But for all intents and purposes, 47% of residential households would have to take a paid service in order for a break-even scenario and to make sure you are sustainable.
I do have one question on that.
Please.
Yeah, so you mentioned this is just residential. It doesn't include an apartment or other revenue and business. How does it change with small businesses? Right now, Brewcom doesn't really do very well in that segment.
Yeah, so we would, I mean, again, you're building out a system to serve the entire community with the capital expenditures that we've outlined here, right? So, if you can sign up an extra 500 small, medium businesses, because you've built out this infrastructure, it's definitely going to support your bottom line. But again, right, because Brewcom is in that space and they're out there, signing up some small, medium business customer segments as customers, it would be difficult for us to project that within these projections, but we would expect that any additional customers that are taking service from the network, whether it's additional small, medium businesses or enterprise businesses or anchors, right, would contribute to the bottom line in these projections.
Thank you.
The other options that are always available are for the city to propose to structure some type of public-private partnership with industry, right? And we're working on several P3s across the country. They take a number of different flavors, as I've mentioned. I thought I would just briefly kind of summarize the two different flavors or scenarios we see P3s being executed under today. One of those is where the city takes a major role in the funding, build out and ownership of all assets that are deployed across the city, right? And those assets are then made available to the partner or partners for either a revenue share or some type of lease fee for them to come in and basically access the community. The reason why you don't have, right, a third-party entity entering Gainesville today is because you have a number of entrenched incumbents that are there, right? It's very hard for an outside entity, a third-party provider, to come into the market and overbuild, right, 100% of the city and come in and take some type of share. So there are P3s out there where, again, the city takes a leadership role in really building out and funding the network, right? They build it for enterprise purposes, for smart city purposes, for utility purposes, and then they make access any available excess capacity to basically serve the rest of the community, right? Residential, business, anchors, what have you. Under that model, the city does have more say, more control, and obviously you're there to also receive a revenue share or some type of participation, really in the monetization of those assets. Through a project like that, right, the residents can receive fiber to the home, competitively priced services as a competitive offering with what they have today. The other scenario we're seeing is really where a partner comes in and funds the build out. The city, you and the city or GroupCom could lease existing backbone infrastructure where it may be available. You can make access to your HUDs and your facilities, your data center available. You can make permitting and other aspects of construction throughout the city as easy as possible. You can also provide feedback on priority areas or areas that you may want to jointly plan, right, like priority 1 areas or other areas that are of concern for you. Under this, the city could apply for and use any funding that may be available, right, things like ARPA money or any of the other funding programs that may be out there. And the city may receive something financially or some type of in-kind service for the partnership. Generally speaking, a partner comes in and funds this entirely. They're not going to provide the city much monetary benefit through this project. I know since our last meeting, there were some mentions around a project that's taking place in the city of Lakeland here in Florida, and I do have some feedback to provide you on kind of how that deal is structured. It is really structured under scenario 2, right, where it's a partner-funded project. And in the city of Lakeland right now, the city is receiving about $115,000 a year for access to its 300 miles of backbone. That fee is an annual lease payment that the city of Lakeland is receiving from its broadband partner. And the city, once the network is built, will begin to start to receive a fairly small revenue share based on how successful the broadband provider is. What's important to note is that once the revenue share grows in excess of the lease fee, it's either or, right? They're going to get paid a higher fee of the two, either the lease fee or the revenue share. So the city really has about $115,000 in lease revenue coming, right? That revenue may grow, but it did have to provide access to all of its poles, as well as all its existing excess backbone fiber capacity throughout the city. So you can see, the city doesn't have a whole lot of say in where they're going to build or how they're going to build. The partner is funding it, and again, is going to take the leadership role in determining how and where and when it constructs. P3s are out there, and they are happening regularly, and we can talk more about that if there's any questions here shortly. I also wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about a few case studies. Obviously, there are numbers of cities and utilities that are out deploying broadband today. Chattanooga is probably one of those that everyone's heard of, biggest name, and has been rated as having some of the fastest bandwidths in the nation. They do have a public utility board, right, that embarked on this project years ago as its partner. They also received significant grant funding to kick off their project back in the early, mid-2010s. EPB has been very successful, right, connecting over 100,000 customers to their internet services, and has generated nearly $3 billion of positive economic benefits to the city within this last decade. City of Palo Alto is another city we're working with right now. We are in design of their full fiber to the home build out. They began deploying fiber optic utilities back in the mid-2000s, and really over the last 20 years, they've been able to fund reserves of about 30 million. They are using those reserves now to build fiber to the home throughout the entire city as a utility, right, city-run utility. We're also seeing a number of small cities taking on projects like this. A good example is in the city of Ammon, Idaho, where they've really launched more of an open access lit network. They have residential services available within broadband improvement districts without their community. And when an EID or broadband district reaches 60% signups, the city comes in and builds, right? This is really akin to really a Google fiber lit concept, where you break up the city into small neighborhoods and really challenge them, right, to get their neighbors signed up. And once you hit a critical threshold of homes that are signed up, then you actually build out the network. Today Ammon has 4 providers operating over that network. There are dozens and dozens of other case studies that we can point to that, again, are taking very similar approaches. Some, right, have a utility authority and a partner like a Groupcom tied to them. Again, many do not.
If you want to go back to the last slide in the Chattanooga example, so their revenues now are exceeding on broadband or exceeding their electrical revenues?
It was their net revenues.
Net revenues, like, so their profit they're bringing in. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, there was a news article within the last about 12, 18 months that highlighted their financial performance.
You can continue, thank you.
So I'm going to just discuss a little bit on funding options, and then I'm going to ask Dave Brevitz to talk a little bit about the regulatory environment and some of the challenges that we reviewed. I think, as you all know, funding for broadband has never been more prevalent than it is today. Obviously, for projects such as these, traditionally cities are taking out bonds, whether that's municipal revenue, telecom bonds of some sort, to finance these projects. Again, the concept of special assessments is fairly new. There are some out there, some projects that you can draw from where they have created things like, again, broadband in districts, or even other types of smaller segments of their community to provide assessments for. I haven't found a single case study, as I mentioned earlier, where a city has done it across the entire city, citywide. So, that is something that definitely requires some more analysis, and we can definitely meet with city manager and her finance folks to work through that a little more and understand how that could be structured. The state of Florida, through the Department of Economic Opportunity, has numerous funding opportunities that are becoming available. We'll obviously see where those are targeted here in the coming months, and whether they're going to be targeted primarily in rural areas of Florida, or whether or not there will be some opportunities for more of our urban customers, such as Gainesville. There's also just a tremendous amount of federal money that started to flow last year through CARES and this year through ARPA. I would point out that just this Friday, last week, the U.S. Treasury released its final guidance on ARPA and what eligible projects can be funded through those dollars. There's also funding out there available through EDA, through an NTIA, and we have the pending Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which was passed just late last year, which is going to inject another $42.5 million in broadband grants to the states. Right? The focus of the infrastructure bill is to connect unserved populations, anchor institutions, and deploy Wi-Fi in eligible areas. There's also $1 billion for middle mile, which is really your backbone extension projects. as well as broadband mapping. Dave, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and take the next few slides, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We did, as part of this project, pick up on the regulatory analysis that CCG had performed. And Florida is unique and, well, I don't know about unique, but Florida has one of the most restrictive set of statutes on municipalities providing communication service in the country. It's FS 350.81. It was an act specifically passed by the Florida legislature to impose some pretty onerous procedures on any city or county that wishes to provide telecom or cable service. That legislation exempted cities and counties that were already providing telecom services prior to April 1, 2005. And so that's where the term grandfathering comes in. Grandfathering is not in the statute per se, but the statute does provide for exemption from certain provisions of 350.81 if the city was providing service already prior to April 1, 2005. And GRUCOM definitely fits that bill. GRUCOM was certificated and went into operation in 1995 or 1996 and has provided residential services in addition to the business services being provided today. So a case can certainly be made that GRUCOM is exempt from, the city of Gainesville is exempt from certain of these provisions as elaborated in 350.81. And so if you look at that third bullet, the statute does require the city to adhere to certain other provisions. It's not exempted from all of the provisions, but in my view, those are just good practice, and the city would adhere to those provisions anyway. You know, using enterprise funding, adopting separate budgets, adhering to good accounting requirements and cost allocations, and regularly reviewing financial results. So the fourth bullet outlines the provisions of FS 350.81 that are exempted for cities that were providing telecom before. And these are kind of the most onerous obstacles, and what they do in my opinion, is force a new telecom operation to go through a pretty elaborate and pretty detailed and pretty onerous set of procedures before the city can provide the service. And at bottom, what happens is it forces a city or county to expose business plan details that no provider would ordinarily throw out in public. And it opens things up to where there could just be endless questions in front of the city governance. Well, did you do this right? Did you do that right? That sort of thing. And then looking at the last bullet, the waivers also applied to cost of service and rates below the cost of service. Well, we don't recommend that. It's a best practice that the city should not subsidize. So that also is something that can easily be met. Court, you want to go next? So this leads us into a series of issues, concerns, and risks regarding the possibility of the city providing broadband service. We've discussed these with the city management leadership and with GRUCOM. They're kind of self-evident. The city attorney's office provided in 2020, last year and a half ago, a memo indicating that the city, if it decides to go forward, should comply with the 350.81 statutory requirements to avoid legal challenges. And that's something that the city's going to have to sort out, whether it feels obliged to go through all the business planning steps that are laid out in the statute. A second concern too is that going into the telecom business might expose the city to paying ad valorem taxes on property that's currently not taxed. Of course, a big issue is where does the money come from? ARPA funds, special assessments, or other public funding. Then on the right-hand side, you can see the other issues that pertain as well that will need to be considered. GRU has a pretty heavy debt load at this point. GRU, from our take, is not particularly interested in undertaking this expansion at present. And as we understand it, GRUCOM is presently implementing two things: a staff reorganization plan and a business plan to provide voice services to existing businesses. And in our view, having those two plans in place is essential before bolting on a residential broadband service.
Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
Are there any questions before we go through the last few slides?
No questions yet.
Okay, great. So again, just to reiterate really where we are and what the next, let's say, month or so has in store for us. So we're here today really to present some initial findings, determine the next steps. Again, we want to develop consensus with the Digital Access Committee on really the path forward here. We have been asked to present the same findings and determine next steps at the Policy Committee on January 27th, and we'll be gearing up for that. Once we are through that presentation, our goal is to finalize the business plan at that point based on the direction from both city leadership and the committees, and be ready to present those final findings and final report to leadership and the commission here within the next month or so after the Policy Committee meeting on the 27th. As far as any process to proceed, once a business plan is finalized, there are numerous decisions that need to take place on both the infrastructure build-out and obviously the final business plan. While we were asked to develop really a fiber-to-the-home business plan, we do want to point out that there may be options for wireless deployment, especially if we focus on certain areas of the city, maybe the priority one area. Also some decisions on whether a P3 or a utility amenity model makes sense, or is there another concept, right? We want to look at. Obviously, governance and GRUCOM's role in anything have to be sorted out. The next step would be really to start designing and engineering some portion of the network as a way to really finalize your costs and to begin to develop your shovel-ready plans and construction plans. We do recommend, before you proceed fully, that a survey of citizens makes some sense. This is something we approached management last year. We kicked this project off, and the consensus with the leadership team at that point was that the residents of Gainesville may be a bit over-surveyed, and that last year maybe wasn't a good time. But we do think it's a prudent part of the analysis that a more full survey does take place before any major decisions are made. As Dave pointed out, there is the processes involving 350.81 here in Florida, that if the city did decide to take a certain approach that they would need to operate under. Again, things like public hearings, as well as a vote on specific findings of the business plan, and also annual reporting. Once you get through the bulk of that, then you're ready to really proceed on developing RFPs and beginning to procure construction partners within this project. The steps here for 350.81, again, just to be clear, does require 2 public hearings, at least 30 days apart. You do have to advertise in the predominant newspaper, You must also identify the geographic area to be preserved and identify the services that are not currently being adequately provided in that area. And then also, there are a number of things subject to the public hearing itself, such as the services, the rates, the pricing, the financials, and also any of the benefits that may come through the project itself, as outlined in that last bullet. There does need to be a written business plan that has a number of items addressed within it, as noted here on this slide. And then the specific findings on those items have to be presented to your commission for a vote. Lastly, there are some restrictions around how you can finance this, and the number of years that you can actually finance a project. Thank you. That is the end of the presentation. We are available for questions.
Thank you very much. Is there any Commissioner Ward? No.
I have discussion, but not necessarily questions.
Okay. I don't see any questions at this time. I think we'll jump into discussion, and then if any questions come up, we'll jump back to you.
Sir?
All right. Commissioner Ward, do you want to start these off? Or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, it's entirely possible to do this. Well, let's be clear that it is not impossible to make it happen. One of our stumbling blocks was toward the end, and they were generally kind about how this was explained, but the people currently responsible in our staff for doing it, in their words, didn't seem particularly interested in doing it. We have, before we are able to move forward with this, we need to make sure that we have staff on board who want to do it. I mean, who are interested in the process. Which is not to say anything bad or cast any shadow on the people who currently run GroupCon. It's just not what they do. So that is the elephant in the room, really. And it's hard for me to understand how we're going to do any of this without knowing that we have the proper staff structure in place to do it. I'm not sure that GRU is the right side of the house to run it, honestly. And maybe they are, but we have assumed from the beginning that it was going to be a GroupCom project. Every time we talked about it, we assumed it's GroupCom because GroupCom has built out the fiber. Very good reason for assuming that, but we should have a broader discussion about who's responsible for this and how it gets done, because we can't assume that the current structure is the right structure. So that's just something I wanted to put out there to begin with.
Commissioner Ayola?
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Ward. There was a couple of numbers I wanted to point out, because there's a couple of, not only is it the capacity aspect of this, but it's also what is the right financial path for the city. So if you notice in the utility amenity scenarios, the break-even take rate is 47% of the market share. I think if any private company, whether you're a startup or whether you're Elon Musk, goes into a market and says, we're going to take 47% of that market share, I mean, you would need not only people to be a fervent believer in that ideal, but they'd have to basically eat, sleep, breathe that aggressive market. I mean, that's a massive take, and I don't think that we should underestimate that. I do want to point out that based on what I heard, that on the third option, the public-private partnership, which, I appreciate that was the most vague of the explanations, because that is one that needs to be sort of figured out if we were to go that route. But Lakeland was getting paid $115,000 a year over the course of 30 years. That gets them to $3.45 million, and that's cash on hand, which is about where we were with the amenity concept. 20-year projected end-of-year cash is about $3 million, and that's after all the expenditures. So I guess financially that could make sense, but it may not, depending on what the lease agreement is and what the costs are. So $157 million for 100% premise connections is a lot, especially for us to take on our own. I don't know exactly where all that funding comes from. It would be nice if we knew where those billions from the federal government were ultimately going to get allocated for the states. I don't want to comment too much on how the state is going to allocate those dollars, but we have a bit of a general idea of how the state likes to allocate its dollars. So I think we're still staring at a very, very difficult sticker tag on this one.
Include? No.
Yeah, and that doesn't even get into going to regulatory stuff, which I would like to see a case study of a Florida city that did this or a Florida county that did this, because I would like to see how they handled the regulatory burdens. I think that is significant.
I mean, I think on the regulatory burdens, we're exempt from, we have to run it as enterprise fund, we have to have separate operating capital budgets, and we have to have separate books and then show financial results after 4 years. We're exempted from any other city that we have way more leeway. Ocala is building out residential, and they're doing it successfully and have been growing theirs out. On the public-private partnership and the 150,000 versus the Midity, where that was 100%, the Midity is us giving it away for free. And after that, we get through formula. I do the private partnership is charging whatever a going rate is. I think, I agree, Commissioner, both of you are talking about if we move forward, we have to have people who want to do it and have to be aggressive at it. Because there are people who, you have to have leadership behind it for it to work. If that's not there, then it won't. I do think I think general government might be a better place for that in making it work. And I think maybe in the bonding area too, that might have more flexibility in that area too. I think one of the things we have to look at for us as a city is revenue, and where are we getting our revenue from, and our high electric rates. And I don't see anyone coming forward. I don't see any plans out there to kind of offset our electrical prices and things like that. And where are we going to get that revenue in the general fund transfer, and that's being decreased, or raising taxes? We have these revenue issues, and you look at other cities that are doing this, that are being successful, and they're making money from it, and revenues coming in. And that is, I think, one of the ways that we can help significantly offset the general fund transfer and helping to lower that in future years. And then I think also in the take rate, I think one of the missing pieces in there, and I'd like for this to be kind of looked at, is, well, yes, GrewCom currently sells to small businesses. We don't really. I mean, it takes us weeks to get a quote out. It costs thousands of dollars of upfront. It's not an easy process for small business. I've been on the small business end and trying to get GrewCom service. It's not easy. Having a quick, easy one where you just pay whatever the price is, people will get GrewCom service because they want service from the city. Everyone knows that it's the best service in the city. It's reliable. It's the gold standard in our community. But when you hear about quotes like, oh, it's going to cost $5,000 to run the fiber 20 feet to a building, a small business can't afford to pay that. So when it's already run across there and they just have to connect, I think we will see many more small businesses sign up for city internet. And I think one of the big things that, I mean, we talked about data caps, and I think that's going to be a bigger issue as we move forward as internet companies look for ways to make revenue. I think one of the other major areas is our data usage and our privacy. Verizon recently has come out that they're collecting all the traffic that they're using, and that is the commodity now of our value right now. Facebook, everyone, it's what data we have, what do we use, and stuff like that. That has an incredible amount of value, and I think it's a scary way that we're going forward as a community. I think people are, and as we move forward, are going to be more mindful of their data and the control of that data, and I think people will want to go towards services. I hope that the city would put in place that we wouldn't sell data, that we wouldn't track it and do all those kind of things. I think that is going to become more and more of a compelling argument as we move forward, as everyone's data is just sold. So I think that's another thing that moves forward. I think it's another thing that's just us protecting our residents and being able to, I don't know, that's a scary path we're going down, where everything is tracked and everything is sold and that stuff like that.
I don't disagree with you on that. I just don't know that we can't, like, that's a compelling argument, and believe me, I very much subscribe to the thinking that data privacy is extremely important. I also know that folks are always going to sign the terms and agreements for every device that they get, for every usage. I mean, they're just going to, and so anyway.
Right. So that's a piece of the take rate. It's one of the things we could offer that might help improve the take rate.
Yeah.
I don't.
No, well, there's just so much for us to bite on. How about we just take turns?
Sure.
So another thing I wanted to address really quick is if GrewCom isn't the entity that's going to launch this, do we still get all of these regulatory exemptions? And if we don't get every single exemption. We still have to have the public hearings with a business plan mandate.
No, we don't.
We don't have to do any of that. Okay,
Those
so
are all
then,
waivers.
can somebody on the Magellan call then explain to me the regulatory review slides once again?
Sure, Dave, would you take those?
Sure, do you want to pop them back up?
I can.
So my question is, if you can hear me,
I sure can.
so because GRU got registered with the Public Service Commission before April 1st, 2005, then the provisions of section 350.81 do not apply to GrewCom. Is that correct?
That is my opinion with how the grandfathering and the exemption would work. I think the city attorneys reached a different conclusion.
I'd like to hear the attorney's opinion.
That was the opinion that was set forth in that memo that I referred to back in June of 20,
I did read that.
where pardon?
I did read that.
Right. That it's not an exemption as much as a grandfathering clause, meaning whatever communications services were provided or financed in April 2005 can continue without need to comply. However, offering new, different services with separate accounting and rate structure would seem to require compliance. That being the distinction between a grandfathering clause and the exemption.
So
I'm good.
I don't see how this is, we've been selling to homes back then too. I mean, we did.
Did we sell to homes?
Yep. We did. We have been selling to homes, selling to places, and selling for a long time. We've been selling a service. I mean, internet. That is
Most
the
people
service.
just don't want to buy it because it's cost prohibitive and labor prohibitive.
Let me ask a follow-up question then. Would it be fair to assume that if we were to claim waiver over these provisions of the statute, that the incumbent companies are still empowered, I understand, by Florida law to make any challenges? I mean, effectively, would a judge decide whether or not we have that grandfather provision?
Yes.
Okay, so that is a known unknown at this point. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for explaining.
And I think your question, just want to make sure you said is if a group com, it was registered under the city of Gainesville as doing business as group com.
Yeah.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, the exemptions would be tied to the city of Gainesville, not to group com. Like that's just
Yeah.
a DBA.
Right.
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I don't necessarily disagree with it. It's perfectly fine, but,
You just moved it.
okay, I've spoken, thank you.
So my thought is, speaking to that specifically, GroupCom is a branding unit of a DBA of the organization. So, I mean, it's hidden down a few layers. It's like Chips Ahoy is Nabisco, I think. I think that's right. Yeah. Anyway, here's what I'm thinking and wondering. We've been talking about the city as a whole, which you've identified in the report as 70,726 units. I know that on a per unit rate, if we did less than that, I'm looking at page 7. I know that if we did fewer than 70,000 units, we would be looking at a higher per unit cost. So if we did half those units, it wouldn't be half the cost. It would be more than that, I get that. But maybe the way to think about this is how we, number one, use it to specifically serve underserved areas. Number one, the priority area 1, and priority area 2, and at the same time treat it as an economic development tool that incents people to move, people and businesses, to move east of 13th Street, or wherever we want to put it. And even though the cost is going to be a little bit higher, there's a good reason to put your home or your business along Waldo Road or along Hawthorne Road, because we've given you, not only is it going to be less expensive to be there in the first place, but we're going to help you out with broadband and get you better broadband than you get anywhere else in the city. So I'm wondering if we took all of priority area 1 and 2 and the area of priority area 3 that is east of 13th Street and grouped those and said, this is where we're going to roll it out. This is what we're going to do. And see what the cost would be on that for one of the areas, I mean, one of the systems, I don't know which would be best. And treat it as meeting an economic need and economic development tool. And see how it works, and then roll it out toward the western areas. I know that it's more expensive per piece to do that, I get that. But there's a better service case to do it that way. There's a public need to do those things that doesn't exist, for the most part, west of 13th Street. It exists, but it's a different case than it is farther east. I think we meet that public service, public policy goal better by cutting it up than we do assuming that the whole thing has to go at once. All of which, though, has to follow knowing which staff area is going to be the leader on, because again, we don't know where it would work right now. We know there are commissioners who want to do it, but we're not the ones who are going to run this. So, I don't know, something that we have to identify the staff, and then I would like to see us carve out areas that meet an unmet need and act as economic development tool, rather than say the whole city.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting approach, and a lot of, there's the cities that build all out and do it all at once, and then like cities like Ocala, which are building out neighborhood by neighborhood and kind of doing it in more bite-sized chunks. A lot of that's a difference. I think that your path forward might be a good one.
Imagine if we built out from Waldo Road between, from 5 Points, let's say, between Hawthorne Road and University Avenue. An area that is
half the city.
mostly, well, no, it's a tiny piece between University Avenue and Hawthorne Road. That's the triangle there from 5 Points out east. That is an area that includes residential areas as well as former commercial areas that are kind of just sitting there now. Maybe that's something that helps incent people to move there and to revitalize those areas.
I think you have to do a larger area or an area that has different,
That's probably true, yeah.
a mix of social economics in there. I think if it's too low of income, just that, then I don't know if there's enough
Sure.
support to be able to financially make it work. I do have a question on just the unit counts here, because we talked about, next slide, it's 70 million for just single-family homes, but on priority area 3, you have 35,000 units. Does that include multifamily, or does that not include multifamily?
That's got to include multifamily.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this map is all of your units across the entire city.
Okay, and that includes multifamily and single-family.
It
Does it
does.
include businesses as well, or no?
Yeah, our projection slides, this should not include business, this should only be
Okay.
your single-family home, MDU. The projections are only on single families.
And
There's a whole host of other issues with MDUs.
yes. So I guess like 4 units and less, or anything that's
Correct.
duplex or triplexes, but kind of. So Commissioner Ward, I think like 13th Street East or something like that has a bunch of different mix of,
Yeah.
I think there's wealthy areas, there's low-income areas, there's a lot of subsidized housing areas and things like that, so we could have a mix of different things and see how it works, and then do a 2-phase approach, and we don't have to bond out everything at once. And I think doing a more incremental approach is probably a more prudent way, and something that I think gather more support. Magellan, what do you, in terms of doing the incremental approach versus, I guess you kind of have that in terms of bonding out incrementally, or instead of just going out and doing one big bond for the whole entire city?
You can definitely structure it really however you see fit. The way we modeled this was with I think it was a 3-year build out, because you can't, just build 600 miles in a single year. So I think to support this discussion, right, I think we try to identify those areas where perhaps third-party funding can be utilized, right, those high priority areas where there's a demonstrated need, right, and then you can look to maybe, bond or finance the rest, and then deploy, right, in those next couple later years. Whether or not you bond it all out and take different tranches or different bonds, obviously that's a question for finance as to how they would like to structure it, but this is definitely a multi-year build out.
It's a multi-year build-out, but it's a full commitment to the whole piece, right? Is that accurate, Magellan?
I think that's a policy issue, right? You could definitely build out portions where there's demonstrated need. You could build out citywide, right, if that's the vision. I don't believe it's all or none, right? In the utility model, you would have the ability to determine what areas you're going to build in or not. So if there is a neighborhood or a few neighborhoods that have, for instance, AT&T fiber, and maybe there is no need, right, then perhaps you don't build out in that area. So I think you can take whatever approach makes the most sense on where you demonstrate the need.
So, the complete opposite from what I think we should do and what I was talking about earlier is to build out beyond the city limits to the southwest. Offer, cheap, fast internet to Hale and the whole thing gets cheaper per unit. Because you're gonna get a better take rate. And a whole lot more customers. More customers equals lower cost for everybody. But it doesn't meet the public policy need that I think we should be focusing on. Particularly if we're gonna put any ARP money into this or any of that, it's got to meet some, it's got to be for the public good. And there's not a lot of public good toward, offering cheap internet in Hale. It's good, it's nice, but it doesn't change anybody's life.
And if I might add, Mr. Chair, the ARP thing, particularly, I know there are multiple funding sources that can be considered, so ARP is one of them. The public need is important, but also the timing, because we only really have a good year and a half with our,
Right.
I know it's 2026, but before you know it.
Yeah.
Another funding source too is the CRA.
Sure.
10 million from that. I mean, that changes the economics considerably in what you could charge. I guess the one thing about building up, I don't think we should put our money out there first right now for that, but it could be a revenue generator. So you're talking about what is a public need? Hale, you build it out there, you're in essence bringing money in. And then there's also, I think, the other thing that the county is going to do some kind of RFP or something to build their system out in the county. And I think that might be a lost opportunity for us too if we don't bid on that as well, in terms of as being able to provide revenue coming in versus some of the commercial providers. And that, the areas they're building out will have 90% take rates because they're areas that don't have internet, they need internet. So, Commissioner Aiello?
Really quickly, so I want to circle back to the segue that I think Harvey left off with, which is what do we want to accomplish for the public good? I'll start from the very beginning. When we sat together and formed this committee, it was to help people access high-speed internet who were either priced out or didn't have that connection at their homes. I want to know what is the cost of supplying those households first. That's what I want to do. For us to get to the take rate necessary for this to be something where the city isn't losing money in the long run, it seems like we have to be supplying a lot more households than what I just mentioned, which starts to get us into the realm of, is the vision now we're going to create a direct competitor for internet service in Gainesville, which isn't exactly, I think, the most important thing. So I guess what I'm coming down to the question is, what we're being asked to figure out today is to try and give some direction for what model we're going to go down. And maybe it's just because I'm super risk averse. I feel like the public-private partnership is the least risky option. It also provides the least opportunity for the city, that is, for the city entity. But I don't think that it necessarily precludes us from serving those underserved areas. In fact, I think it maybe gives us a little bit, because now instead of taking on all this additional operational risk, where, if we can't even get 35% of the take rate in 5 years, we're not putting at risk everybody else's connection or running a red for years and years and years, like currently, Bluecom is, and Ironwood is. I don't know. I guess maybe I'm just a little bit nervous about the risk involved in some of the CapEx expenditures.
So I think those are fair points, but at least for the mission, it was connect people, but it was also, it was to connect every single home to affordable, reliable, every home and business to affordable, reliable internet, and fast. It wasn't just the people who couldn't afford it, it was everyone, because there is savings across the board. Yeah, there is a risk. I think that with a public-private partnership, the risk goes down, but you lose control of who you're going to help and what prices they're going to be. And I don't see a private company going and offering super cheap internet to someone who doesn't have a lot of money, because they're getting into it to make money. That's where, when the city controls it, we can maneuver it to being a public kind of good and being able to move it towards where we want to go.
So if we're using any of the city-funded side of the PPP model, we can keep the existing infrastructure resource for ourselves. We would say we're not letting go of the existing fiber network that we have, because we use that for other things as well. And we need to continue to have those things available. We can force them to meet a public need. You know, that's going to come at a cost. You know, we're going to have more money in the more we demand back from it. But it is possible to do a P3 approach with carve-outs for the public need out front. I guess one of the things a couple of questions that I would need answered is, what does it cost to build this out if we only do it east of 13th Street? You know, does it end up being 140 million as opposed to 157 million, or is it, you know, more like 80 or 90 million as opposed to 157 million? And who's going to do it? Who's going to be in charge? You know, that is a huge question for me. That it's hard to want to nail down funding sources through the city if we don't know which part of the city is going to run it. I can't think of anything else that we do where we don't know what department or even what half of the operation is going to run it before we start talking about funding it.
We'll do it.
So,
We usually know if it's GRU or general fund.
That's true.
just for context on the meeting. So basically, the next steps as presented here, I don't think we're going to get there today. The questions you just posed are not questions that we can give Magellan today.
You're right.
So I really would hate to have to ask you all to adjust your timeline. But I think you're going to have to, because I don't think we're going to reach answers to some of those questions today.
Hey, if I could, this is Courtney, I can answer one of those questions. We did provide a cost estimate on each of the 5 priority areas we identified. So while that doesn't answer your question specifically, what it costs east of 13th Street, you can see what the costs are for the priority areas, right, with the number of households, which should give you some indication as to, potential costs for that area. That is something we can look at and try to determine, but yes, we don't have that today.
Can you answer the staffing question?
Well, so yeah, the staffing question is a tough one. One thing I do want to point out, right, is GrewCom has done a phenomenal job over these years building up infrastructure, building up a core infrastructure, right, facilities, operational capabilities. While they don't provide residential services today, right, again, they have a lot of the processes, procedures, methodologies in the correct place that are very replicable, right? We don't, and again, we communicated this to Mr. Feldman before he left, and we communicated to the city leadership just the last few weeks. You know, it would be really tough to duplicate and rebuild and invest, right, all that money that GrewCom has invested over the years in a core and operations and data centers, right, for the city to come and stand this up and go focus on residential. We just don't see that as a sustainable option. And, anything that's done really needs to be as a bolt-on or expansion of GrewCom. It would just be very duplicative to have to rebuild, right, all these systems. So, as far as operationally who does this, it's very hard to not imagine GrewCom having a leadership role in that because of those things I just mentioned.
Right, so, and I don't want anybody to walk out here thinking that that GrewCom is not good at what they do. They're very good at what they do. What they do is not what we're talking about here. That's an important distinction.
And I think one thing is GrewCom, these are all just city departments. They can be transferred
That's right.
anywhere within the organization, and GrewCom could be transferred over to the general government side. And I think there fits a lot of other things too. I mean, the emergency radio system as well. I mean, it's a general thing that serves everyone. And kind of is a general government entity, not really a utility thing. I mean, it is, but it's a general thing. So I think that's something that could be looked at, transferring those assets from GRU to general government, and then being able to move forward in that fashion.
I heard the county wants to offer us a bargain basement price on the whole thing anyway.
I'd be very interested to see what they think. I think they think they cost a lot less than they do in reality.
Well, having heard that, thank you. We're going to have to hear directly from the general manager as to what his proposal would be for GrewCom. And if his opinion is that GrewCom shouldn't, I need to hear that. And I think that's going to be the next step forward, because we need to know if we're going to ask either the general manager or the GRU manager to take steps with staffing. And we need to know that now. So, maybe not right now. But I look at a presentation that tells me there's going to be a finalized business plan sometime after January the 27th. And I really want to thank them for the work they've done. This is certainly not easy work. So I want to make sure that we're being cognizant of the time that they're giving us as well. So we need to, I think, make some of these decisions sooner than later.
So I guess, what does the committee think is the best course of, I mean, we could bring it to the whole commission and just have this discussion with them, or bring it back here and have them try to answer some of the questions that we brought forward. I think those are the two different, or make sure we have all the answers, or those answers to the questions we have, we just brought to the full commission as well. So I think those are the three options that we have. I don't know if you all have any thoughts, Commissioner Hill, Commissioner Ward, or staff as well. But
I'd be okay with it going to the full commission. I just also know that, this timeline, we're basically telling them, no, we can't follow the timeline that you gave us. We have to create a new timeline by going back to the commission, and then the commission's going to create its own timeline. So as long as our partners who we're working with are okay with that, I know obviously, they want to be, but what I don't want to do is I don't want to create a process that is not, that most people are not okay with following. Like we all need to agree on the process that we're going to have going forward here. So I think it has to go before the full commission, which is the only reason I say that. But I know what that's going to do to this slide, and I always hate doing that. So sometimes you got to do what you don't want to do.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly not in a position to follow that timeline at this point.
so I guess one thing, do we want to, I think the midi one where we give it to everyone for free, I think that might be too difficult for us to take on. I don't know what the thoughts of the rest of the committee are. Or I guess even, Magellan, you said you haven't found anybody else who has done that, is that correct?
We do not have a case study whereby, a fiber internet service is provided as an amenity, right, or a free service. We have case studies where cities, in coordination with libraries and school districts, are building out, CBRS wireless networks and providing an amenity type, subsidized type service. But that's very different than building out a fiber enterprise as an amenity, we feel.
And then I guess there's cities that are providing subsidized service to certain low-income individuals, though. Is that correct?
There are, yes.
Yeah.
City of Chattanooga is a great example. They just provided fiber internet-based services to all, for instance, low-income households in Hamilton County, which is like their greater service territory. So absolutely, there are providing amenity-based, not amenity, subsidized-based, depending on, again, demonstrated need.
And that'd be something I'd be interested in.
And Commissioner, to just respond to your remarks on the timeline, again, we'll circle back with city leadership and management, and if we need to push and move some dates, again, we're happy to, and we'll follow up through them after this call.
So a thing that needs to happen, I think, is I would like for the general manager and city manager to have some conversations about this, about how this might look going forward, so that we're not,
And I did see it.
yeah, so we're not just saying, here, do this, or Ed, do this, without
Well,
it
it's-
being a collaborative approach.
Sure, and it's not as if we have not had some
Right.
discussion about it. Yeah, I think the consultant has pretty much summarized it in terms of where GRU is right now, in terms of risks and concerns from a business approach as well as legal. And I know you haven't fully heard that from GRU, and yes, that would be appropriate. But my concern is that, if that was a situation that they were asked to do, knowing that they have those concerns, the time it would take for us to work through the business issues would not be in the best interest of the public that's out there waiting on the service.
Right. That's fair.
Lewis and Ed are both waiting on Zoom. Lewis won't.
Do they have their hands up, or did you want to say something, Ms. Pilarski, or?
And Lewis too.
Yeah, I was asked a couple times, I guess, about some of these issues. First, let me be clear that I think Brucom has done actually a wonderful job of building the infrastructure that's been needed by the utility as well as general government, as well as the University of Florida and other providers within the state, and that was, or within the city, and that was their mission. It's not a lot different than a shared service that you might have, HR, accounting, some of the other services that are also trying to mitigate their costs by earning additional revenue. So sometimes I think we cast Brucom in a very unenviable light, in that we're trying to make them a retail provider when they're not one. But they've done an excellent technological thing by bringing the superior broadband to Gainesville. And so I agree with the commissioners that we should try to take advantage of that. I don't think there's anybody on Brucom's staff that wouldn't want to get more business or help the folks that are disadvantaged, bridge the digital divide. We want to do that. The dilemma for us always is how to do that in a prudent manner, in a business-like manner. Whether that involves transferring Brucom's operations over to general government so they could best facilitate that, I'd be glad to sit down with interim city manager Perry to discuss those opportunities. What you need to understand, though, is in that there's $50 million plus of debt that goes along with it. So that's not something that we would be able to do that. So I would be glad to have a nice open discussion about this moving forward, wherever that avenue takes us.
Thank you, Manager. So as far as next steps, so I'll answer that question of what the committee. I would like to see Commissioner awards of kind of half the city, and what would that cost, kind of 13th Street and East, and a cost estimate for that portion. That's pretty close to what 1 and 2 are, but.
Yeah, but I think that the subsection of 3 that is east of 13th Street is a really intriguing piece there too.
Yeah. And then I think also with the general manager and city manager discussing PRUCOM and kind of what that might look like in the future and where that might sit. I know there's been discussions in the past with previous city manager, I don't know, with the current.
I've been introduced to the
Okay,
conversation, and I'm not there yet.
Yeah. So I guess, do we want it to go to the GPC in a couple weeks and just discuss it there and have the information we asked?
Sure.
I'm comfortable with that.
All right.
Yeah, I'd also like to get Florida case studies. You mentioned Marion County, I think.
Ocala.
Ocala, the city of Ocala. I'd like, is it possible to ask our Magellan advisors to add that as a case study for the rest of the commission to see?
Absolutely.
Okay, I really appreciate that, thank you. Because I would also like, right now, I don't know which of the 3 pathways is the right one for the city for. I don't. I don't want to dismiss the public-private partnership because that may be the only acceptable risk the city can take right now. If it isn't, if there is a plan to mitigate the risk of options 1 or 2, I want to know what the cost of that plan is, and I want my colleagues to have both options in front of them to make a decision. And to be fair, I think we could, because the thing about the partnership is we put out the request for contracting. We can have stipulations in that contract that are a bit more stringent. Now, we can't necessarily intervene in the customer contract relationship with the company, but we can certainly try and set parameters. And I want to know what that looks like. I want us to have all the options on the table when the commission discusses this as a whole.
So hopefully this will not be coming back up at the next meeting?
No, we're talking about,
January 27th GPC meeting.
Jan 20, okay, the GPC.
GPC meeting on the 27th. We should probably just try to get that first on the agenda.
yeah, I don't know what else is there.
Yeah. This will be a meaty one.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can I ask, are the other items to be brought back to that meeting, or do you just want to have a discussion at that meeting, waiting for the
Not
other
sure what you-
information? You said you wanted a cost estimate for this additional case study.
Oh yeah, I think for that GPC meeting, that's, yeah, the January 27th. I mean, I don't think we need a full-blown case. You're just looking at kind of what they've done and stuff like that, or?
Well, I keep getting told that people are making money off of this. I want to see those ledgers. I want to see what kind of money they're making.
So I guess, yeah.
I can see the costs of what we're going to spend, but.
And I guess, yeah, if I guess there's other, to Magellan, other cities that have done this and are making money, if you can provide those as well.
Then forward. Will do.
Okay. Any other discussion from staff? Commission? All right, open up to the public.
Hi there, Commissioner. Should I?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I was pointing. Excuse me.
You can go, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Good morning, Commissioner. Brian Eastman. I am the founder of Connected Gainesville, a group to bring that is pushing to bring affordable, high-speed internet to everyone in our community. This has been a really great discussion, and I'm glad you guys are really starting to get down to some of the weeds of this, like they're bringing forward various, the various ways that we can start moving forward. One of the things I just wanted to bring up is that there's been a lot of talk about risk during this whole thing, and of course any kind of infrastructure investment is risky, right? But as far as the relative risk compared to this is, say, like building a new energy plant or putting in a road or things like that, the having a slightly lower take rate might make a slight drag on the budget every year. Having a slightly higher take rate will make it so that you'll make a little bit more money every year. But the relative risk of what we're talking about here is not significant, particularly if you have good folks at the table that are really pushing on this business plan, trying to move forward on various things. This is basically, this is infrastructure, right? So what we do every single day as a city, it's what GRU does. They run, running an energy grid is a much more complicated scenario than connecting people to internet access. The government's good at doing infrastructure. It's good at customer service. The city of Gainesville's done very good work on this in the past. So the relative risk of this is fairly small. And you can see in places, Commissioner Arioli, you mentioned people making money, for instance. In Ocala right now, they are rolling this out neighborhood to neighborhood for a very different reason, right? Not for necessarily the socioeconomic issues, but more as they want to create a smart grid, a smart city and connect everything through fiber. So this is just a way for them to continue to make money while connecting their fiber out. And as they're slowly connecting it, they're just connecting home after home after home and seeing money coming in for that. So they are making money while also increasing their infrastructure. But what they're doing in Ocala is they have a great guy, Mel Poole, who's over there working on it, really staying on the ball. It's not being pushed by the commission, but more by staff. And that's, I think you guys made an important point, is staff does have to be behind this. There has to be smart people at the table working on this. Commissioner Early also mentioned public-private partnerships, and that's one of the things that's in here. Glad to hear there's been some good public-private partnerships in the last 5 years. When we first started Connected Gainesville, that was my first thought as well, is this is risky. How can we kind of dip our toes into this in a way that's not going to be totally on the city of Gainesville? And at least from my research on it, it's been the public-private partnerships aren't necessarily less risky or even more risky. And in some cases, they are more risky. You're now in a contract with someone. Getting out of contracts can be difficult. As we've seen with we had to get out of a large contract recently with GRU. That contract itself can be just as expensive as the core infrastructure that you're putting in. And Commissioner Ward, you mentioned, how do we dip our toes in this and start moving forward? I'm not speaking for Connected Gainesville, but just personally, I'm also a risk-averse person for how the city can spend money. Small build-outs are good. Working with the local neighborhoods, trying to figure out which neighborhoods this will work for, where we can get money for it, and where we can also do the best good socioeconomically. It doesn't have to be an all-at-once type thing. In fact, it can even be on a home-by-home type basis that we're looking at if we want to get down that micro. The nice thing about how this infrastructure goes in is there's lots of ways that you can go about doing it and really pinpoint it to the right places to make sure that the city's making money on it and that we're helping the most amount of people. So thank you guys for having this great discussion, and it's a great report from Magellan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, is anybody online?
If anybody is online and would like to share a public comment, please dial *9 to raise your hand. I hate to interrupt you again, Mr. Chair. Was there an actual motion?
There's no motion.
Just direction. Thank you.
While we're waiting on that, let me throw this out there. It's probably not possible, but if there would be some kind of way where we could get a working model where we could say, we could change the take rate on a laptop in front of us and change a few inputs, the take rate, the bonded amount, the ARP amount, a few of the variables. If we could get something that would let us see what the end cost would look like per user by playing with a few variables, that would be really useful to me. And I don't know if that's something that Magellan would feel comfortable putting together, or how hard that would be to put together, because if it's really hard, you're going to charge us more and I don't want to do it. So.
Yeah, so I would just say that there are usually 3 or so variables that we focus on within our models. Right, uptake is obvious, right? How many customers can you gain? The rate for service and the services is another. And then, capital and your borrowing, right? Your debt service. Those are really the knobs you can adjust. We have offered to workshop the model, our financial model, which can do everything you asked to do, with both city management and with Mr. Walton over at Grucom. And I think we could prepare some sensitivity analysis slides for public presentation, if that's helpful. Varying those, again, as I said, knobs in our model. I think it may be a little tough to do on in a public setting
Sure.
in real time.
Yeah.
But we're happy to do it with staff and then present those findings.
What do y'all think?
I think it might be helpful. And I just have one. Your cash on hand at 20 years, 4.2 million. That's not 4.2 million a year. That's 4.2 million just in total, correct?
That's correct. That is the cumulative amount over that 20-year period.
Okay,
What's left
so-
from the bank.
All right, so in terms of like, even going down a few percentages, like losses would be a couple $100,000 a year. I mean, it's not, I guess some sensitivity analysis, I mean, it's not really, going down a couple percentage may not be a massive, even if there was a loss, like the worst case scenario, it's less than, I mean, what we spend for Depot Park, providing internet for, I mean, Depot Park costs us $700,000, $800,000 a year, I think. But,
Right, it's
yeah.
a question of how we think about this.
Yeah.
Do we think about this as an amenity? Is it something that the city can share and be proud of, like a park, like a street, that we never expect to make a dollar on? We always expect that they're gonna lose money because that's what they do. Or is it something that we see as an actual business model, like a P3? And, you know, if your amenity model is over here on my left hand, and the partner-funded P3 is over here, where do we want to be on that scale is the question. And then remind ourselves regularly that we chose to be a business, or we chose to be a park. And hold ourselves to that so that expectations don't get out of hand.
Yeah. All right. Any other discussions or questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone in Magellan. I really appreciate your hard work on this and on the previous study as well, and everyone on the staff too. With that, we will, I guess, close the discussion and move on to. I guess we'll see you all on the 27th with Magellan. Public comment. Is there anybody who wants to talk on something that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, member comment? No? All right, we don't have a next meeting date, but I think we'll just see what happens at the General Policy Committee meeting and take it from there.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yep.
All right, we're adjourned.